but it doesn't matter. What you draw is just the process. And actually within doing that, it's
So welcome to the show, Sarah Darke.
thank you. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you very much for the invite as well. Nice to see you, finally.
Took long enough. So what got you into art?
I've been into art actually. I can't not remember drawing or just being interested in art, fascinated. Um, I also remember photography. I think my father was into photography, and I remember his first ever Polaroid camera, and then sort of like setting us up to sort of take a little photo, and then obviously the magic of seeing a little black and white Polaroid picture coming out of that, and just being fascinated. And he used to drive my mum bonkers, taking his tripod and everything around, and just like I drove my husband bonkers, like carrying a load of stuff, setting up, and then going, "Are we going now?" And it's like, "Well, I haven't even taken a photo yet," you know. So, but ever since I was young, I've been drawing. Always at school drawing. My pictures were on the wall, and yeah, I went to art college straight from school. Then I didn't have a confidence, went to go into nursing. And it's always been that thing between sort of like nursing and care, but never had the confidence. And I think when my health sort of deteriorated, it was like I saw a course with photography, and I thought, well, just try, and that was it. And I was sort of really in my adult years, I've come back to do what's things that I absolutely love. So even though my health deteriorated, it drove me to a direction that to my passion really. So
How much did your health influence that decision? Did it just block you off from doing what you were doing, or was it something where it kind of, I don't want to say make you look inwards, but it made you look at your situation and go, if I don't do it, then I'll never be an artist?
I think I didn't really think about being an artist. It was always when I was nursing, I was always drawing in the background, always going out for walks, collecting things. And, it's always just part of me, something I think that was good therapy, good sort of winding down. And then as my health deteriorated, I suppose, yes, I mean, my back went generally like a lot of nurses. And I just got to a situation, I was looking at what to do, although I think I saw a class on photography and I thought, well, that sounds interesting, but I didn't want to just do a hobby class. I wanted to do something quite serious. I kind of find that at a place called Dillington House, and it was like a professional class. And I thought, well, I'll try that. And I started, and I remember my first film that I took and exposing it and coming back and just bring it into the class, and my teacher going, I think you better take the first year like in 6 months rather than in a year and a half. And I was just like, but I was doing what I wanted to. So it seemed very natural to go into that when, I thought, well, I'll just try it. If I'm not very good or, then I'll just call it a day. But it was just sort of going back into my passion, really, and just thinking, well, okay, not necessarily looking at it as work, but doing something I loved and just seeing what came of it.
What is it about art that makes you love it? Because if it's something you've always done and that you have no memory of doing anything else, what is it? What's that link or spark which has just made you do it?
Hmm.
Because it sounds like a very autopilot response for you. It's like to do art, do art. Yeah, it's like beep beep beep. Sort of thing.
Yes, I think when I was nursing, it was always sort of there in the background. Got to draw, got to do this because it's just part of me. I didn't really think, and I think I always had that. I think I've read before, like Cancerians, a typical sort of like doing art or care, and it's always been this wrestling. Um, and I loved care work, but it's also very difficult. When I realised I couldn't, I suppose art is it's something I always just did in the background to wind down, and I didn't really. Yeah, it was very natural, just part of me. And I think as I've got older and come back to it, also much more with confidence as well. I think that's a big thing. It's like, well, that is a huge part of me, and I yes, it's not. It's just who I am, and not being able to do that. Would be quite strange. And I just found something that really sparked my passion even further, and the the desire to sort of constantly ask questions as well. And what if I do this? What if I do that? And I just I suppose I disappear into it. It's very therapeutic, and the whole sort of world behind you kind of disappears while you're focusing on that. And I sort of I found when I was doing it, I thought I want to learn more. I'm desperate for more, and I found a master's degree course, and I thought I don't have a first degree. Am I possible? Can I do this? And I took my portfolio, and the next minute I was being enrolled, and once I started, it was very strange doing that, but I just found my passion. And I think also during that, I became even more ill, being completely housebound. And it was just natural to pick up the camera or to do something in order to cope with things. And it was like, well, part of the challenge, if I can't do that, well, I'll look at this. And I think also my mum's always taught me, it's like stubbornness in me. It's like, don't tell me what I can't do. I'll go and find out what I can do. And I'm just damn right stubborn. And it's, yeah, it just, I didn't want to, when I was very ill and completely housebound in the middle of my master's class, I could have just given up or just looked at going down a route of suing the hospital and a huge event happened. But they're so negative, and I wanted to just continue my class because I was so fascinated. I didn't realize how ill I was going to, or how it's going to affect my life. And I just became, well, everything around me, okay, even if I was sat, even just a close up of sort of watching something, it's just on a micro scale. And even if I went to do the washing up, you didn't even chance by the bubbles and everything. It's just bizarre. I mean, obviously, I was taking quite sort of painkillers, which helped as well. But you just sort of disappear into doing something that's creative. Like, don't get frustrated, get creative. And my whole life was just in a little bubble, but it became smaller. But art kind of sort of gave me a way of like enlarging my world. And I just stuck at it. And it's, again, I do that with my work. Every process I use, it's like, okay, what if I try this? What if I mix this process? And I love that idea that you can just, anything goes.
It's also given you a way of being, well, giving you something constructive to do whilst you were housebound and ill. Because some people, it's actually quite common. I don't know how common for people to get ill and then just go into a depressive spiral because they go, no, yeah.
Yeah.
You had the opposite. You had something to do, and that gave you, it helped you to manage and cope with your illness because you had a constructive outlet.
Yeah. Yes, it was very therapeutic. And I think I was, again, stubbornness took over. It's like, because nobody thought I'd go back to my class because I was literally, I mean, I was in a body cast for nearly a year and really couldn't do much. And I was where, like, before I'd been out with my cameras down on the coast and things, I couldn't even leave the house on my own. It was really difficult. Sometimes even just getting up from the sofa to go to the other side of the room was difficult. So I get bored very easily. So what can I do? And apart from getting myself in trouble and stuck places with my cast, I'll slide off the sofa and get stuck. It's like, well, if I'm here with my camera, what can I see and what can I do? And it was very therapeutic. And yeah, I could have given up and become like a 10-ton Tessa on the sofa and also just looked at the negative things. But again, it's like my body, and I have to find a way to deal with it. It's my life. You can't hand people say, "Oh, you should sue the hospital." It's like, well, no. As a fellow health professional, these things happen. That's not positive way, and it's also that can take many years. And I know, God forsake people that have to do that. It's incredible. But for me at the time, I want a way of just coping day to day because it was very distressing. And I'm not pretending at times that I didn't get very low. Um, but it certainly it was like a therapeutic way of like, yeah, enlarging my world. And that's how I coped. And I think I'm very lucky for that, to having art. Yes, I certainly am.
How would you describe your own art style? Because you do a lot of lumen print.
Bonkers. Probably a bit bonkers. Lumens are, again, I got into those. Some people think, oh, are they all painting? I said, no, it's a chemical staining of a plant on the photographic paper. Because after I used to go in the darkroom, I had stacks of old darkroom paper, and I thought, what am I going to do with this? And I read a little bit about this technique. So I thought, oh, I'll go and have a play in the sun. What if I put a plant on this? And it just took off. And from that, then it was like, well, in the winter, it's like, well, okay, people don't make them in the winter, but why? Well, what can I do to try and make them in that, well, I can add contrast by adding salt and other things to the picture and the plant and mix and put it onto cling film and expose it for 14 days and see how it go. And it was all the time like adjusting things and all the time it's just asking questions that often leads to the next technique. Or I'll see something that I'm inspired by on Instagram and say, oh, I wonder if I mix that process with that process. So I think it's always like the inquiring mind afterwards. What happens if? And yeah, sometimes I'm doing things on my kitchen table, and it looks like a mad scientist meets the Muppets in there with playing with ferrous sulfate and oil and water and inks and all sorts of things. And it's, um, but yes, I can get in a bit of a mess and ruin floors, and but it's just part of who I am. But um, I think sometimes the time of year, if the light's good, I like to be out making pictures, and then it's like, oh, I'll play with this process. And I've always got like several ideas in my head. I can't get my body to catch up with my ideas sometimes. So sometimes it's like a big mess in there. It's like, well, I'll try this, and while I'm doing that, waiting for that, I'll go and play with this technique. So I think it's always just experimental, and just ideas, and just having also the idea. Well, I'm not afraid. It's like being permission to like just go and try. And I think that's a big thing. A lot of people with doing art as well, what if I make that mark on a paper? Is that okay? And it's like not having that shut off. So just go and try it. Um, so yeah, I think an inquiring mind and an experimental sort of ideas and ahead of far too many ideas.
Could you put? You said about putting plants on the lumen prints. Could you put other objects on there? Or is it literally just plant life or wildlife? Because I've seen your ones with the butterflies and dragonflies.
Yeah, yes, you can put anything on there really. But at the time I have a lovely. I mean, that's part of. I'm very lucky. I have a in my living room. I have a sort of patio door that goes straight out to a little garden, and that's like my little sanctuary as well. And I've also grown up playing with plants and also looking at plants as well. Oh, that would make a good lumen. And so hand in hand with that process is like growing things as well, and actually enjoying and making my little space like colourful, and actually just focusing more on plants because also that's very much I am fascinated also how the life cycle of plants as well. Watching them when they first come out, you get excited. Then when they come out and they bloom or they bud, then sometimes some plants can grow over very quickly. Alliums like that I became very fascinated in it, and I made a series of in a sense of like metaphor as well. Like my father had dementia, and at the time I was really angry, and again I turned to things like that. How can I express it? Um, and watching an allium, I mean, it's beautiful when it comes out, but it's so quick. But also during the stages of its lifespan, it's also very beautiful, even when the structure has lost all the seed heads and things. So I made a series of three, and it was like going, going, gone, but still there. And I was kind of using plants as well as a metaphor for life, dealing with grief. I also lost my husband a few years ago, and it was very much like how to use plants. And I think it was just natural. I love growing things, but I also interested in their structure when they die. They're also quite beautiful the way the plants wither, and it was a natural thing really to grow things and enjoy doing that rather than putting other objects. I know I can do, but I always seem to gravitate back to plants and then throwing things like salt and lemon juice and everything over them. And I get lost that way. But I know there's a whole nother field to explore as well.
Do you use apricots, berries, and just maybe slice them and then chuck them on there? It's like, hmm, they'll go nice.
Yes. Well, actually, sometimes more food in my kitchen. It's like, well, I bought that to eat, but actually, I'm quite interested in like pears as well. I go and slice them, and it's like the next minute I've got like the pear I was going to eat, and it's out there on several different papers. Like cut it up, or tomatoes and things, or peppers, and it's actually quite funny because all the juice that's coming out that you'd actually enjoy is well, actually, that's what's feeding the paper and the chemical staining, the process that's going on. So there's some of the delightful colours that and I'm using mostly black and white paper that you'd make black and white prints on. But the colours that come out of those papers are incredible. It really is. Well, I also use colour papers as well. But yeah, I just get fascinated. What was the question? Sorry.
What is a lumen print for those that don't know? I should have asked you that
Um,
first.
I did wonder, yeah, a loom print. It's essentially a bit like a photogram where you use the sun to develop an image on paper. Whereas with photograms, sometimes people would use enlargers. I go out and I use the sun outside, and I would use photographic paper that you would normally expose in a dark room. I put a plant on there. I put glass on top, fasten it sort of so it's got good contact. So you've got sort of like a little sandwich of maybe like an old picture frame sometimes I use. So I put the paper, the plant in there, paper, and then the glass on top, and I bring it outside to expose to the sun. And that can be the image can develop on the paper from anywhere from like 5 minutes, 20 minutes to 2 weeks in the winter. And within that, there are so many variables. I mean, the papers, I don't store them correctly, but that's part of the magic. Because I mean, one of the papers is 100 years old, so it's made very brittle. So every single paper, the way you store it, keep it, there's so many variables, plus also the humidity of the sun, or the day, time of day, all sorts of. So I kind of get used to what papers do certain colors, and maybe I've tried them with certain plants the same thickness, but it's always like a surprise. There's always like an element that sort of comes out and that just really surprises you. So I like that serendipity as well.
It sounds like something my generation would not do because it requires, no, let's be blunt, because it requires a lot of time and patience. And you know what the stereotypical thing is now, where you want everything fast now and easy. It's like, yeah, I could, whilst I'm interested in doing Lumen prints, I could imagine myself after day 3 going, is it done yet? When I said I'd leave it for a week.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I think you're right, actually. There's sort of patience. But then also I think my patience is less as well these days. It's like, I'm like my reading things and it's I'm a bit like I'll just read something else. I think we all do that as we now. But I think once you start with it's just so fascinating. I mean, a friend had asked me to do prints of her hand, and I thought, well, I don't really like doing prints for other people because it's difficult to say, well, it's never going to look like that or that one because every day's different. And when she was sat there, she was really fascinated just watching the paper color. So she became really intrigued. And I think if you can grab that sort of initial interest, and like it is a fascinating process. And there's so much science, there's all sorts of other things going on there as well. But it is, yes, you have to be a bit patient. Um, but I don't know. I think if you get people interest, I think there is much more renewed interest in these processes, especially since COVID struck and people were home based. People were looking for very much things that they could do at home. And when they were looking at photographic processes, this is a lovely, easy one that doesn't involve lots of chemicals. So it was a nice starting point for some people. And also a very simple process like cyanotype as well, which is blueprinting, can be done alongside it and mixed as well with that process. And that has sparked a lot of younger people kept coming into these processes and ideas.
You said about it being kind of old school and retro, but I think it might be part of like this wave of nostalgia because you can go into stores now and they're making proper brand new record players and records and stuff, and there's that old nostalgia. There's a video game reviewer, author, game developer called Yahtzee Kosher who said that typically these like nostalgia waves and stuff come in every 20-year periods. And he's obviously using it from a gaming background. This is back when I was into gaming, and I'm using his example. But it might be the case where, with something like Lumen prints or very old photography, it might be longer because it's not so fresh in the mind, and people are always looking to discover things.
That's a really good point, actually. Yeah, so, yeah, I think you're right. Actually, very much people do like to look back at things every now and then, sort of pick, and you see that in fashion and all sorts coming through every. But I think with photography going from sort of where I was like processing my own films to darkroom, now it's gone to digital. There are many people that have never even they can't even get the idea of concept of actually developing a film or the idea of their image being actually on a film that you have to then wait for to be developed, wait for it to be printed. And I believe some people buying film cameras now are actually going in exposing a roll of film and then going, well, I'll just have the prints and throwing away the negatives because they don't understand, well, that's the data you want, but they just want the digital data. But there's also, I think, with digital imaging, it was for me as well, when I picked up the digital camera, it was very clinical. It was amazing to be able to use technology to help me do the things I wanted to, like the computer is a digital darkroom and also a digital camera. But it was incredibly clinical, and I didn't enjoy that process. You lost the hands-on process, and I think some people also when you use a certain apps and things that give you that old look of old photos. And well, I've got a cupboard full of old plastic cameras with bits of tape on them that are actually those are the cameras that you use with plastic lenses that are dreadful, but they give you the most beautiful, dreamy images. But your phones, your apps and things like I've forgotten the app now. That will give you, using an app to try and actually give you that. But I'm using a camera to that actually where that app comes from is trying to mimic that. So people start becoming a little bit more interested. But I think also with COVID as well, people were looking with more homemade things as well and looking back for things and thinking, well, okay, well, if I'm interested in that, and Instagram's incredible as you just feel an incredible rate. Well, asking questions a bit and saying, well, how can I make things like that? Or and processes, how can I do that? But something simple. So they have sort of some people have got into that idea of doing these sort of process is a way to use the hands as well and introduce a bit of chance and difference to it.
It sounds like people are looking for more of a hands-on approach instead of everything essentially up in the cloud.
Yes. Yeah. I think also it's like, well, people getting into the crafts like knitting, crochet, and things. It's that idea that I made that, where everything with the digital age seems to be like, well, there it is, I've done it, there you are. But it's all very fantastic, but you don't see any of the process behind it, or there's no handmade in that. And I think there is a need to do that. We're human beings. We like to make things, whether it's cook and do all sorts of things. So definitely people looking for that handmade thing and personal side of it as well.
How much does that personal side assist with you making your art? If you love the hands-on side of things and you think people enjoy the hands-on, how much does that help you keep going with your art? Because like you said, if everything's digital, but you don't see how it's made, is it the entire process you enjoy, or is it just
I love the whole process. Yeah, I mean to see it. It's still the magic of seeing a Polaroid from when I was younger. I've seen that sort of image just literally happen in front of you, and also when I'm making lumens, when you first take the plant off the paper and you see the marks that that's created, that you can never replicate that again, and it's just fascinating. And sometimes I'm a bit of a prolific image maker. Once I start, I can have like, I'll just put a couple of images out. The next minute, I've got a patio covered in 20 images going on, and I've got something else going on in the shed. I just get caught in that creative moment, and I just go in that sort of flow, and I just go off on one. But to see the images and things that you create after, and then also to see different things in them as you, because I don't fix my images. Once the image is taken made, I will go and scan that image in immediately because if you put the paper in the fix, it will change within seconds. And often the colours and things, because the papers might be bromide or other things that are involved in coating the paper, it will change to mostly browns and creams. There's only one paper I've discovered that doesn't change the minute. So you lose the vibrancy of the original colours, like oranges, pinks, and yellows and things. So I scan it in as it is. Just literally take the plant off, look at it, and go, "Oh my goodness," And yeah, it is. I've never really heard of this process early on, but once I saw it and started, I'm just hooked. And also the amount of chance, serendipity, but everyone is unique. You can never. It doesn't matter. You've got the same paper, two images, same problem, and one can go pink, one can go yellow, and it still boggles my mind as to how that happens. No answer.
feels like the paper itself is colorblind in some regards. It's like, oh, this blue's red, this green's purple, and this brown's grey for some reason.
I mean, I know there are people with like science backgrounds and it's like I have no idea what. So it's just the absolute wonder of it, and I mean, you do try and replicate things. It doesn't happen, but just the things of all things that you discover, you just never stop learning, and I love that actually.
You recently had a music artist approach you to use some of the art pieces in, was it a concert?
Yeah, yes. A gentleman called Marcin Alexander is a composer from Budapest. He wrote to me on Instagram, and I love your work, and I find it really inspiring. Would you be interested in having your work projected while I use your work as an inspiration for a piece of music? And by the way, it'll be in a gallery in New York. And I was like, that's and first of all, because you think first of all, I mean, the amount of scams that you get, and it's just like, oh, by the way, no NFTs, all they know, and it's like just, and there's so many scammers. It really is. It really sort of plays on you sometimes. I thought, well, I don't really know what someone will get if they thought that they could scam me, and I thought, oh, it's actually true, and it's well, yes, please, I'll be really fast. So he said, I'll get my agent to contact you, and it's like, oh, okay. So she did. And the next minute, and this lovely man wrote a piece of music inspired by my image. And apparently he does this quite often. He likes to look at, I think this obviously works for quite well, looking at artists' work of all sort of mixed media, all sort of painting, to as work to sort of as a jumping off point to inspire his music. And he writes pieces. So he wrote a beautiful piano piece and talked about my image, and I watched it live streamed from a New York gallery at sort of 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm thinking, that guy's talking about my work, he's mentioning my name, and that's my image. And it's quite sort of, it's a bit surreal actually. And I thought, that's like thousands of miles away, and that's my work. And he's mentioned my name. And this isn't a scam, it's real. And he's just written this beautiful piece of piano music, which just captured how I sort of felt. It was really, really quite surreal, actually, but beautiful. And I must post it. I know I'm terrible for getting round to things, but it was an incredible thing. Yeah, I played it to my mum who loves the piano, and she was in tears. It was such a beautiful thing to do. We really felt very honoured. Yeah, but very surreal.
Mummy, here's my piece.
I know. It's really like, oh my goodness, it's by the way, I'm in the New York gallery. It was like it was fantastic. Yeah, it was really beautiful.
And the composer from Budapest decided to use my work.
Yeah. Oh, you couldn't make it up, and it's like, and I have like, what's that happen? Yeah, because usually it's just constant NFT people and scammers on Instagram, and it really does sort of you lose your will to live at times. You just think, what am I doing this? And I sometimes I sell my work, I do, but I just love making it. It's part of who I am, and
Oh, so you prefer the making over the monetary side of things?
definitely, I'm terrible. I, well, I've had some exhibitions. I love them. I've done quite well, and I've got a range of cards. But the marketing side of it, I think a lot of artists are just dreadful, and I am just appalling. And I've to the point of I haven't even got a website yet, which it is on my to-do list and has been for many years. I know my friends, well, you've been telling me that for years, and it's like, I know. I have Instagram, and a lot of my approaches come from there. But it's not my concentration. I just make it. I found it very stressful. And last year I did try and actually use it as a jumping off point, my exhibition, to go and actually be much more self-employed in things. And unfortunately, right in the middle of it, I was struck down by breast cancer. So it's like, and in the week as well, I lost my dog, I lost a relative, and it was just the whole world just went crazy. And it was like I put my head down, just did the exhibition and got on with it. Um, but through that, I mean, I was very lucky with cancer. I haven't had to have treatment. I'm very lucky. But the stress of it, everything else, I just thought, no, what's more important to me is actually it's part of who I am. And obviously, as you get older and my health and things, you just think, I'm not going to chase that because my head's changed actually from where I was. And I think that really sort of puts in perspective things. And um, I just make it because it's part of who I am. I have to do it. Whether I sit here doodling at night with my pastels and doing all sorts, that's just who I am. And if people like it, which is really lovely, but that's not what I'm doing it for. It's for myself, Morley.
Feels like an impulsion.
Yeah, it is actually. I mean, even if I was on the phone as a youngster, the phone book, I'd sit down, I'd cover the phone book in doodles, and it was like, oops, my mum would, it's just always doing something, and it is, yeah, I very much realised it is part of who I am. It's a huge part, and if I have time where I'm not able to do anything, then my mood disappears, and I have to do so, whether it's drawing. So I think that's why I like lots of processes, because however your health is, I can work in and around my health, whether it's I can just get a sketchbook out, draw pastels and things, or go outside and make prints. It's, yeah, but it's a huge part of who I am, definitely.
If you couldn't do Lumen prints, but you still could do your art, what would you do instead? Because if art's such a compulsion for you, but if
Mm,
art's still like an arbitrary restriction of,
mm,
you can't do this anymore because the Lumen
mm.
prints, you can do whatever you like, what would it be?
God, I probably get myself in. Actually, last year when I was recovering, I've always wanted to go back into painting. When I was at art school, so I allowed myself to do a painting class, but it wasn't for the idea of like I want to do this and make it amazing painting. It was very much about the process, and I found a course which is amazing. Just that really struck part. It's like making ugly art, but it doesn't matter what you draw. It's just the process, and actually within doing that, it's like you find yourself, but giving yourself permission to do things, not putting restrictions. Well, I'm going to draw this, it's going to be like, and then getting distressed. It was actually, no, I don't want to do that. But within the process, I learned so much. So yeah, I was throwing paint around, and yeah, my kitchen looked like, oh my goodness, because that's why I sort of, but I had a whale of a time. But I'm sometimes I'm really struck with thinking, I want to go and get my camera out, I want to go and do this process, but actually part of me wants to go and get my pastels out or go and get the paint out. So sometimes I really wrestle with myself. Oh, I should be doing that. So, well, no, actually, just do how you feel, or whatever materials you've got around, just pick up and do something. So I will always do, whether it's painting or pastels. But it was just nice last year to actually give myself permission to play with paints, and actually find a class that really embraced that as well. But anything really.
What's your opinion on the idea that a person's art is a reflection of that particular person? Because I was just thinking about as you're saying about the painting. I can talk about this because this was um, put out in a public exhibition. But there was this one art student who put their time in foster care and had like printouts of all of their like emails and stuff from time in care. And
Mm,
I was with this guy I just met, and I said to him, they say art's a reflection of a person. What does
mm,
this say about
mm,
them? And I
mm,
want to know, what do you think of that stance? Or like, say if I make a piece of art and it's a bit flamboyant in nature, then that reflects me as a flamboyant person. But if it's quite dark and depressing, then you can infer that I'm quite a dark and depressing person. Because I always try to find it doesn't just relate to art, but whatever you try to suppress,
mm, mm.
it has a way of leaking out
Yes, yes,
in
it does.
some regard. Like
Yes.
no matter how hard you try and shut it down, it's just gonna
Yeah.
like
Mm. Yes,
yeah.
yes. I think also is, I mean, as people, we're also multifaceted, isn't it? You may be happy 1 minute, and literally seconds later, you could be down in the dumps. So the piece you're working, again, the time that you're making it is a reflection also of that time. It's a snapshot of the time of those emotions as well. So it is, I think, very much, but it's not. It could be just one side of a person, or again, it does depend on time, whether it's made in a snapshot or just quick. It's instant or long, but within that process as well of your feelings can also change if you're making work, because you learn and you reflect on, so that can also change the trajectory of the work as well. So I think without a doubt, I mean, there is always a reflection. I mean, you bring your experiences, your whole being to a piece of work. It's very piece to actually remove yourself from that, and definitely like the person, showing emails or texts and things that was happening during the time of being fostered. All of that, to all those emotions that might, must come up. All of that, all help inform that piece of work. So I don't think is you can't step back and say that unless it's I was going to say like AI coming into things, something making things like that in a different way. But I think that's another ball game. But yeah, without a doubt, I mean, that's what makes us human. That was what I think why we like art, because something touches us when we see something, we recognize something, or we recognize. When I was making certain things, when I was, working through grief as well. It captures some of those emotions, but at the time of doing it, it was also a release, but also um, other people could maybe tell some of those feelings, but yeah, it captures all sorts of emotions, whether it be seconds or over a period of time. But without that, I don't think you can remove it from the person being very personal and sharing experiences.
I would also say it's who you are and how you act is heavily influenced by what you've gone through and what you learn and what you do and don't learn. Because it's what you know and what you don't know that determines the outcome of your life as well.
Absolutely, yeah, and also as well, as you grow up as well in all ages. I mean, I'm not the person I was when I was nursing, but those experiences, and I wouldn't swap those experiences I had for the world, and also and learning about other people, how they perhaps view the world, and that's sort of giving you a wider understanding. But without doubt, you grow, and your art reflects that at every moment of your life. And literally, you can be sad one minute, something happens another few seconds. Your moods change so quickly, and I think without doubt, I think that's the beauty of art and what it captures in various forms. It's always a reflection of ourselves and our experiences, without doubt.
Do you try and use your emotions to enhance whatever piece you're making at the time, or do you try and detach so the piece of art can be what's the word I'm looking for? Where it can be separate from your
What's
emotional state. Hmm?
thematic or something? I don't know.
I
Um,
think so. I was going to say omnipresence, but that sounds completely wrong. That's completely wrong.
I can't think of the words. I've been very.
There's a word for it, I'm going to say.
Yes, I can't think. Without a doubt, I think even just start painting last year, just trying to sort of like shut my brain off that goes, oh, you can't do that, you shouldn't be doing this, and all of that is just trying to get in that sort of flow of like just letting go. It's you put on a piece of music that influences everything around you influences, but I think it's very difficult just to switch off, and I don't know how to switch myself off and not be, in a sense, present, because I think that being present and that sort of letting go and just focusing on what you're doing is part of what I love and the fascination. Also, as well, not just I find my work and have found it much more therapeutic, but also physical pain as well. It's I think studies have shown that with people that were into gaming, they were registering their pain level before they went to a certain experiment on putting units on and being involved in gaming. Now, after they'd been focusing on the games, they measured the pain level after, and it was significantly reduced because the brain can't focus on two things at one time. So while you're focused on this or making art, I'm not concentrating on my pain. I'm not saying that works all the time, but at some points, there's some bits of pain. If it's just sort of mild, I'll go, well, I'm just going to, it's sort of distraction in a sense, but you're focusing on something else. You're redirecting that sort of focus and energy onto something like that. So I think actually it helps in those terms. For me, it does. And it's interesting. I think it's only a sort of side of science that we're only beginning to learn or look at, actually.
It's interesting how they did that study with gamers then, because game you think they'd be really good at multitasking with their reputation, but yeah. This is coming from a former gamer, by the way.
Yes,
Wow,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, but I just thought it was interesting the fact that yes, they had these headsets on and were very engrossed in the games, and then they registered the pain levels immediately after, and they were significantly reduced. It just shows the brain's ability just to focus. Really, yeah, you can multitask, but when you're really engrossed in something and you let go, it's really quite an amazing experience of just letting go. But it can be therapeutic, not just sort of psychologically, but with physical pain as well, it can really help. So for me, that sometimes is a conscious act as well to go and do that or distract myself. I can't remember what the question was.
Do you prefer to distract yourself with your art, or do you see it more as no? Is it more of a distraction for you, or is it just? I mean, like we've already said earlier, it's just that impulse you have to keep feeding all the time.
I think it's probably both actually, and also that constant love of just experimenting and just going okay. And when I was literally stuck in a cast on my sofa, not being able to move, it was like, okay, I'll pick up a camera. What can I? And it was always like, don't get frustrated, get creative. It was like one of my silly little mantras, just as a way of kind of keeping myself going because there were some dark times. And it's part of that sort of like, it's part of me. I have to go and do something. I love the physicality of doing, whether it's drawing or painting or doing something, but I love also the result as well. And whether it's a pile of rubbish, it might be, but you've always learned, you actually learn a lot more from something that's rubbish. So, oh, well, that's interesting. Or again, that's your own filters going, that's rubbish, or it didn't go how you expected. But I'm trying to turn off that expectation and just go with the flow more and letting things happen, switching off your sensible head basically, and just getting more into that go. But it is without doubt, it's so much part of who I am, and it's what feeds me. And yeah, but I love the process as well and letting go very much.
How would you recommend people, and especially artists, to shut up that brain where it's not going the way I want? Shut it. Because whenever I try and draw, I get like that sometimes. But my last drawing I tried to do, I found a picture of a cat on the internet. It was like half spread out, like it had one paw over here, one paw over there. It's like looking really weird. I tried drawing it, and let's just say it doesn't look like a cat. But then my mind was going like, oh, this is not how it looks like. It's not how it's supposed to look like. It's supposed to look like that picture, and now it looks like something from. No, it looks like an eldritch horror.
Abstract. Like, you, that sounds like horror as well, yeah, with the sort of like an arm up there.
And the cat's head just does. I think that's the only thing that looks like the cat I tried to draw.
That's a really good question. I think if when you when you're drawing to any art, it's like what's your intention? But you've got all of these little voices, haven't you? Whether you've been a trained artist or not, you've got like society. Oh, you can't draw like that or that is, and also what you expect of yourself. What you're expecting to do. If you're expecting to copy something and it just be like that, you might often be disappointed. But to turn off that brain and just go, well, it doesn't matter. It's just like, it doesn't matter, or I'm just responding to how I feel at the moment. If I want to draw an abstract cat and look like it's been in a horror movie, it doesn't matter. I was just going with the flow. And but doing this class was very much about like, do something, make ugly paintings, because it's like, well, it doesn't matter. These are part of the process of actually letting go and turning off those voices. It's a big process to do that, because it's like all through your life you've got all these voices. Don't do it like that. Do it like this. And so it's a huge process to actually be able to switch off those little voices, and also your knowledge, your experience, and everyone around you, and what you really expect. So I don't know how you do. I think one thing is sometimes when I get stuck is play with a different medium. If I haven't played like with watercolors or done so, well, it doesn't matter. I'll just have a play and just have no expectations, but just the actually of enjoying like the medium as well, just like the of like, or even hands in paint, or just the feel or the smell of it, just to do something completely different to give you and you just experiment and play. Actually, play is a big thing as well. Letting go again, letting you almost like your child come out actually and just enjoy those materials and switch off all those adult silly voices. That's why, but it's very difficult to do that at times.
It's easier said than done, isn't
Oh,
it?
hugely, hugely.
One last question. If you could only make one last piece of art, but that had to be a masterpiece, what would you make and why?
Wow, that's a really fascinating question. Oh goodness me! Wow, my first one. How long could it take?
There's no rules. I just said that's
That's a really fascinating. Hmm.
because you could technically cheat that and say, I'll just work on it for the rest of my life.
Exactly. That's why I'm going like, where are the rules? Like, yeah, that's why I'm going,
You said I can make one. You never said it had to take the rest of 20 years.
yeah, exactly. Because I start with paint and pastels, and off I go, and I could be there, yeah, until I die. So yeah, I wouldn't go and do a Lumen, because that would be like within minutes or an hour or two. So I go, yeah. So
2 months later, you'd have to take the glass off.
yes. That's an interesting question, isn't it? Yeah, to an artist like that. I was looking for the way out. What can I make of that? That's a fun question.
You could make a skyscraper out of tin cans if you wanted to. That would take like
I just like the question, how long have I got? And also, then it would never be finished as well.
Okay, I'm gonna throw that in as a stipulation. It has to be finished. No,
And also,
no, I'm not. Okay, the time frame fine, but it wouldn't allow you to go. Never done.
yeah, and the thing is also with paint pastels, you go, I don't like that. I'll just get the white paint. That's another layer, so I'll start again. That's what I've been
Oh no,
learning.
this
Oh,
petal was 3 degrees off.
yeah, that's what I've been learning. I don't like it. Cover it. White paint's your friend. That's just a layer. That's the layer of all the experience and all the difference coming. That's what I've been doing this last year. So that's a good question. That's fun.
I was just completely lost. What's the last piece that you do? How long is this gonna take?
Sorry, that's my brain how it works.
Oh, I'll give you this. That's actually quite a creative way out. It's like, how long's it got to take?
Definitely. That's fun.
What would you make in all seriousness?
Apart from a mess. I'd have so many ideas like, well, I'll do this, I'll change my mind now. And it's like, well, I've got these paints out, and I've got this out, and it's like, well, I've got this out. I You ought to see my patio. It's got various spray paint and all sorts on it. And also the dog ends up with paint and just a big mess everywhere because I can't shut my brain off going like, oh, well, I'll try this and I'll try, what if I mix this? I don't, I, th- I think actually, yeah, I probably would go for a Lumen actually because they are quite unique and also you can't replicate it again. So maybe actually, if I had to choose, it probably would be something. I probably take a little bit longer to think about what I was doing and then make a lumen because you couldn't replicate it.
Sarah Darke, everyone. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about yourself or your art?
In the absence of a website on my to-do list with everything else, is on Instagram as Sarah Darke, Dark with a neon and art, Sarah Darke Arts, but that's where most of my work goes, or Facebook as well.
What's up, everyone? If you enjoyed that episode with Sarah Darke, then you will enjoy my conversation with another artist called Roscoe Britton right here. But if you want something a little more vocal in nature, then I have Ariana Rapsner right here. Go on, give one of them a tap